Well, you know, it helps if you open it up a little bit. There we go. Hi, guys. It's a rainy, cold evening in lower Alabama tonight, and hope everybody's doing well. I'll wait till everybody gets on. I'll talk about the main topic tonight, but just wanted to say hey and see how it's going. Beach Brero, hello. How you doing? Diane, hello there. Diane, how's your percussion revolver stuff going? You doing okay? Ryan Walker, hello. And Mike Bolton, how y'all doing? Here with the beer, man of the hour. Oh, yeah. Hiram, hello. Hello to South Carolina, Frogmore. Mr. Johnny, hello. And Jonathan Gable, or Gable. Guys, I'm sorry. You know how I pronounce things. Oh, Chris, hello to South Africa. Good morning to you. You're up way early, way over there. Let's see, you're on the opposite side, so you're starting summer on your side right now, aren't you? We're starting winter here, and it's about 63 degrees and misty rain, that constant downpour a little bit, so kind of chilly down here. Joshua, hello, Tennessee. Talk through a safe load for a 12 gauge percussion smoothbore. Okay. A dram was, I believe, right at like 28 grains. And so when you're talking about a shotgun load, the modern load, smokeless load, duplicates the black powder load. So the power is the same. So let's just for the sake of argument, say 30 grains, round it up. Is what I always did. So 1 dram is 30 grains, 2 dram is 60 grains, 3 dram is 90 grains. So somewhere like 2.5 dram, so somewhere around the 75 to 80 grains, and you vary that a little bit. And then an equal volume of shot. So how I would load a percussion shotgun was, for a light load like that we're talking about, I dropped like 75 grains in. Then I would put down my wad that went between the powder and the load. Now, what I used was the thin top cards. I just bought them, or I cut them out myself. And I'd put 2 of them down on top of the powder charge. Then I would put the shot load in, and then I'd put one down on one of the same size card down on top to hold the shot in place. That would handle just fine for like squirrel, rabbit, close range, bird load, stuff like that. So somewhere around 75 grains of powder. And then for the amount of shot, I would use the same measure and just pour it full of whatever size shot. So it was a 1-to-1. Now, once you start actually shooting it and get on a pattern board, usually a little heavier on the shot side balances out better. So it would usually end up being 75 grains of powder, let's say, and 85 grains worth of shot. Seemed to be a good middle of the road. And every gun is a little bit different, but that's a way to do a percussion shotgun and get it on paper, get it going. Michael Burley, yeah, I'm glad you like them. WC knives are fantastic. Mopar, hello. Good, Dan. I'm glad that you got your latch pin fixed. You know, I've had a lot of them over the years that's happened eventually. That pin is just kind of pressure fitted in there. And it, for the guys that don't know, what we're talking about is on the loading lever of a percussion revolver, there's a little spring loaded thing where there's a hollow space in the front of the lever, and they've got the latch, and there's a spring behind it, and there's a pin that comes up through the slot, so that each side of the latch does this and goes through that pin to stick out and hook onto the latch and hold it. Well, the pins will eventually walk their way out. And it's so short, and it's the size of it. There isn't any real way you can paint it, but you also might squeeze the opening closed, and now your latch don't want to go back and forth real easy. A lot of those, I take from the little small finishing nails with a head on it, and I would put the head from the side that's when it's closed, you can't see it's coming from the top going down, and put it in there, and I would cut it off with a set of nippers, just a grunt too long. and then put that down onto a hard like an anvil and braid out that pin, and that would usually fix it permanently. So it's something down the line, but that teeny tiny pin, it can be a pain. And if you got one that unlatches a little too easy, you fire and it automatically comes down. The latch is a little too weak. Something you can do is put it in up there and lightly tap it and kind of squeeze that opening closed just a grunt more, so you get a little bit more friction on the latch itself, and therefore that it doesn't want to just come open on recoil, because if it's just sitting there floating, recoil can cause it to push back on that weak spring and detach. But if I put a little bit of top to bottom friction on it, it might not be so easy. Either one will work. Hello to the Panhandle of Florida. Alan Rice, good evening. Nick Hall, hello. Mike Bolton's only 30 degrees here in Washington State. Yeah, we got cold coming in up top. The edge of it has reached down here, and we've had that small hurricane that's come into the middle of Florida, and it's coming straight up, and it's about 100 and something miles from me going east. But we had the cold front come through last night. So you got the front like this and all this cold air right in front, and here's the hurricane, and it's sucking the cold air straight down the edge of the front. Where I'm at today, it was in mid-60s, and it's a wind and rain. You go about 75 miles to the west of me, and it was 10 to 15 degrees warmer, and you go about 75 or 100 miles that way, and it's 10 to 15 degrees more. That suction of that hurricane was actually pulling that cold air down to it, so it's destroyed the hurricane. And all it is rain now. It's like a cold, wet winter rain for me. James, hello to South Carolina. Mike Hall, good evening. Alan, hello to West Virginia. James Singer, have Blackie, have you tried the curve bullet? Not yet. That does look very, very good. I do the Johnson & Dow, I do the Colt, and I've used some of Cato's. But I've looked at that curve bullet for percussion revolvers, and I'm thinking about getting one from Mark. I've talked to Mark quite a bit in the past, and he's up here at Huntsville, Alabama. So I'm going to see if I can get one from him and try that out after the first year. Good evening, Miss Pam and everybody down there. Hope y'all are doing good. Joshua, you're welcome. Mike Hall, what's your favorite fish to catch and eat in Alabama? Brim. Called sunfish in other parts of the country. There's a lot of little names for them. But there's, oh boy, blue ears, shell crackers, perch, yellow bellies, red bellies. There's all kinds. It's just variations of the same. But I like the taste of them the best. I grew up as a child fishing for them a lot. With just a cane pole, a hook, and a float. A lot of times it was just heavy sewing thread because it didn't have official fishing line, and that type deal. And you can catch most of them fairly quickly and easily. They're easy to clean, and there's relatively a lot of meat for the size of the fish. Bass are second choice. Cats, I like fishing for cats, but cats are a lot of work because you got to skin them. And a big cat can be an effort to skin that sucker. And a lot of times they've been on the bottom and we haven't had a lot of rain. Cats will have a real gamey taste to them because there's not a lot of water and they just sit on the bottom in the muck, And so, yeah, brim, my favorite. Hello, Forrest Gnome. Mr. Pink, how you doing? Barone, good evening, sir. Joseph, hello to Columbus, Ohio. Hello, Mr. Bear's in the house. Bailey Brunson, that's Bear. Colin says, evening, Blackie. Been loving your knot videos. Had a chat with my local game warden. He's going to look in me getting close. Excellent. Good. You get a little training. Mike Bolton, I have made paper cartridges, but I got the one from Arizona Bullet Mold. Not Arizona, excuse me. Guns of the Old West. Dustin Winnegar, I believe is his name. I got his set, and I got one for the Walker for the 44 and the 36. Haven't got the 31, but I've been very happy with it. That uses a small round of red things as opposed to the Manly. But the Manly can work very well. Mount Kephart Outdoors. Hello there. I'm glad to be on. Word Jasper, thank you very much. Mr. Kingsbury, hello, sir. Good, Mr. Kingsbury. We need to get together and go camp one of these cool afternoons. Just get up with me. You got my number. John Kennedy, hello, sir. How you doing? Mopar, have I ever used 296 powder? I have, back whenever I was doing 44 Magnum. I experimented quite a bit with 296. I haven't in a lot of years, but I did at one time. I can remember making big purchases of 296. So, William, good evening. Okay, here's what I want to talk about tonight. As many of you probably got my impromptu early today live. Apparently somebody got onto my Old Ways 18 and was pretending to be me and asking you to jump to Telegram or Telegraph and etc. That's a scam. The only media that I am on is, and I'm going to do a video for this tomorrow for those that might not catch the live. I am on YouTube, and I am Blackie Thomas on YouTube. I am on Facebook, and I'm Blackie Thomas on Facebook. I'm on Instagram as Blackie Thomas, and I've got a single video of me posted on Instagram. Well, actually several. And it's where I share my videos. The algorithm likes to share to multiple mediums, so I share to Twitter on there. And then I've got one, I believe it's Rumble, that I have just started, and that's where I'm going to put the Survival Shotgun series. But I will never in a comments thing like that tell you to do something like that. That's not me. Just know it. If I've got something to say, it's going to be a video. It's going to be me saying it into the camera. So if you see somebody doing something like that, report them, because it is not me. Jump on them. And I appreciate everybody's support. And I'm not sure what they were trying to do. I'm sure it's going to be some sort of scam or con. And there are a lot of Twitter employees right now looking for a job. So there may be some scams popping up. So guys, just be ready. Baloo, hello there. Lewis, thank you very much. The Spencer, yeah. Rogers and Spencer, excuse me. Yeah. I'm going to get back to that. That's a Dragoon. I want to get out and hunt with it. Herbert Oakley, you're very welcome for the sharpening tips. I'm going to try to do a series on skills because I've done all this in the past, but I got a lot of new followers. I've gained over 10,000 followers in the last few months, and a lot of them have not dug back that deep into and I got over 1,100, I think, videos. I need to go through and delete a lot of videos and just remake them, because it was so poor quality and so far back. But in my mind, I know that I've covered this. Problem is that was 8 years ago. And so I need to go back, and I'm going to do a skills series. And I started it with knife sharpening. And I'm going to do how to do the knots, how to do, things like that, and try to come back with basic skills. And that way, when somebody asks, Blackie, have you done? I can say, here it is in this. Here's the playlist. And to help bring that up. I should have done it a long time ago, but I didn't. You got to understand, guys, computers are still not my comfortable medium. I do the best I can, and I fight this puppy. And it is a knockdown drag out sometime trying to figure out what I want to do and what it wants to do. But, when it gets real bad, I go and get somebody younger than me and say, fix it, Steve, yeah. Whenever you want to do it, sir, just get up with me. Middle of the week's fine. Whenever, we'll go do an overnight. I'm not on Instagram. Excuse me. I'm only on Twitter. That's the only mediums I'm on. So I'm not on Instagram. I'm only on Twitter. And like I said, Rumble, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. That's it. And in the video I'll post tomorrow, where I'm going to kind of rehash this and everything, I will put down in the comments, these are the only official sites that it's me. And that way you'll know it's me. Again, if I'm going to say something, it's going to be to the camera. Even if I was going to post something on Twitter, I'd probably just do a video and post it to Twitter. because y'all are used to listening to me as opposed to writing it out. And it's just too easy today for somebody to fake your image on a pic and just duplicate everything and put it out there and try to scam you into doing something. So, and I'm the same way. Hello, Mike Simmons. Good evening, sir. And Chuck, hello. Anything goes. It's only anything goes. Only going to be one video there. It's just like a placeholder. That's coming up. I'll expand that a little later on. I've had people that have sent in friend requests, and a lot of people have said, I sent your friend request and you didn't answer it. And I don't. Thank you very much, Mike Bolton. It's not that I'm trying to be snobby or whatever, but I get a lot of friend requests. I mean, at one time I had over 1,000. And if it's a pretty girl, I'm pretty sure it's a scam, but I've had to back up and many times I've approved and said, okay. And then the next thing you know, I got some guy saying how he's a Marine vet. This says there, and I need $500 from you this month because I can't pay my power bill. Yeah. This is in the first 30 seconds of chat. So yeah. There's all kinds of scam artists out there. So we just got to be, hang in there. Hello, Gray Wolf. I know that forest gnome, but we'll try to avoid that. Edgar, you're supposed to be able to load 7.62 torque rev to 1900 feet per second without going. Okay, hang on. 7.62 by 2.5 torque rev, 30 caliber Mauser, 30 caliber Luger are exactly the same external dimension cartridge. However, that 1900 feet per second was in Czechoslovakia, and it was used in the Czechoslovakian submachine guns in the CZ-52 pistols, which has a rotor lock breech like a machine gun. If you drop that into a torque rev, you will crack the frame. It's a 357 Magnum load equivalent in a gun rated for 38 S&W. The Czechs were doing that to kind of thumb their nose at the Soviet Union. That way that they could use the Soviet ammo, but if they tried to use the Czech ammo, it'd bust their guns. So the only thing that could use that 1900 feet per second hot load was the CZ-52 and the Czech submachine guns. Anything else, you run the risk of cracking it. I know this from experience. Back in the 80s, whenever the stuff was coming in surplus ammo, and I got a CZ-52, and you could buy at that time, I think it was 70 rounds for $12. Came in a little paper packet. And somebody that I know went to buying them and shooting them in a Tokarev, and he got maybe like 100 rounds, and it cracked it. It's just way too much power. So it's what it's being used in as much. And the problem with those antique cartridge designs was they didn't change the cartridge. It's the same cartridge. You could get a broom handling 30 caliber Mauser, and at the same time you could get the CZ-52 and 7.6225, which is 30 caliber Mauser. They just kept the case exactly the same and upped the power level, and it was what you were putting in. How do you make small cuts on the Remington base pin? I take a triangular file, go get them. It's just triangular file. Harbor Freight and things like that have needle files. These are small diameter. The diamond ones will cut the most aggressively. Take your base pin out there, and what I suggest you do is like run a piece of masking tape and put a mark at about every 1/16 of an inch, maybe every 1/8 of an inch. And then just take it and saw across top. You don't want to make it terrible deep. You just want to make it where a fingernail will hold on to it real good. Okay. Think about like the groove you find in like an earring or something like that, where you can hook a fingernail in it, but it's not terrible deep. That type deal, and just cut it and rotate it and keep cutting. So as you rotate it towards you, keep cutting till you make a ring all the way around, so that you can get a little bit of grease to stay in it for the Remingtons. Concentrate more toward the front half than the back half. Okay. Gray Wolf. Yeah, there was somebody there for a time that was ripping off my videos and going and reposting it as him. I forget the name of it, but there was somebody for a while doing that. And then I went going on his channel going, hey, I remember when I did this. Oh, that was a good video. Yeah, that was what, 8 years ago I did that. And I started commenting on his videos and he suddenly shut up. So, Easton, can I make a bow and arrow? Yes, I've made hickory bows and arrows and stuff in the past. Survival type bow, quick and dirty. Yeah. Long term where you got a good dry blank, scrape it down and do it. I've done that before. If you're looking for an idea for that, Jamie Burley is a master at that. And he does classes on it, and I believe he has a video series about it. And the Bower's Bible, there's 3 books in that series, and they carry all kinds of historic bows and etc. and tell you how to make one, even out of pine. You just have to adjust the shape of it to match the power of the wood, and you can make a fairly usable bow out of pine as long as it's wider and a little thicker at the base and like a hickory or something, because that's a better wood. So there's all kinds of stuff. But yeah, bow and arrow stuff. I did that a lot when I was teaching Boy Scouts. I was an instructor, and I made quite a few of the survival bows back in them days. Do I still use kukri? Yep, sure do. Carry it all the time. That's rain, what you're hearing. It's raining on the roof pretty heavy. Let's see. You're very welcome, Joshua. Thank you for watching. Yeah, Edgar, that Herdeberg 9mm. There were a lot of cartridges in the past that were really, if you haven't seen it, go check out ForgottenWeapons.com. It's a channel on YouTube. Ian, and he does a lot of guns that come up and the history of them and stuff. And there's a lot of stuff out there that's really impressive where he's done the research and etc. Like the first nation to adopt a semi-automatic rifle was Mexico, not the UK, not Germany, it was Mexico, and it was the Mondragon, and it was in the late 1890s, and it was about like 7mm mag power, even by today's standards. And that's one of the reasons it didn't last terrible long, because the average guy couldn't shoot that thing and just beat you senseless. But he got a lot of great weapons and history of cartridges and stuff like that. So yeah. Hello, Bob and Joshua again. Hello. Mopar, yeah, that 7.62 check. The Soviets had to have special ceramic plates to stop that. And when I had that CZ52, at that time, the CZ52s were selling for $79 a piece. And like I said, 70 rounds of ammo was $12. And it was just a hardball, but it would go right through a vest. Peter, been practicing shaping knife and axes. That's a slow process. An axe handle is really a work of art when it's done well. The balance, the way the grain goes, the way it fits in the hand, the contours and etc. A store-bought one that's been made on a lathe is adequate. If you ever pick up one that's been handmade by somebody that knows what they're doing, light years different. It's just it's so much easier to work with. Likewise, when you get one that they didn't know what they were doing, it rubs blisters. You can't seem to get it to work right, and it's really a work of art when you get somebody that knows what they're doing and they make one. Edgar, would they have done better in Vietnam with 30 carbine instead of 5.56? I don't think so. The actual advantage of the 5.56 in those days was it tumbled very easily. The round had a 50-grain bullet, and on impact with anything, leaf, whatever, it started just pitching and yawing. Well, you see actual combat photographs and things of guys getting hit in the arm, and it looked like you just took a chainsaw and laid the arm open. If it was tumbling at a high rate of speed, when it hit, it was horrible. Yet if it hit dead on, it made a nice clean hole all the way through. And so the M1 carbine was never designed to be the mainline combat guy. Yes, they carried it a lot, but really, when you got beyond like 150 yards, you were really struggling trying to hit a target with it because of the sights, trajectories, and everything else. And I know a lot of guys who carried them in World War II in Korea. And the 5.56 shot a lot flatter and faster. And you're going up against AK-47s and SKSs. And yeah, you're better served with it. Once they got the bugs worked out of the AR platform, it was a better gun. They just had to work all the bugs out. Okay. Okay, Peter, you want to know about making razor sharp with an axe? An axe that is razor sharp is a very thin edge. The average axe is much blunter. Okay, it has to be because what it's chopping. A very thin edged axe, like you see these guys doing shaving and stuff like that. I'll bet that the axe they got is one of the old Forester's axe had what was called a flint edge. Super hard edge, and you could hone it to that kind of edge and it would hold it. And you see it in competition axes and stuff like that today, that when they hold them up, you look at the big body and it comes down almost knife blade thin, and it's easier for them to get that kind of razor edge on it. But unless you've got that type of steel and that hard, taking a regular axe to that kind of edge, it's just going to bust out when you hit. The edge becomes too thick, and you're using an blunt impact weapon, and you hit an old gnarly piece of oak, and it's going to sink in there real good, and it don't want to come out because you've made the edge so thin it cuts limbs off beautifully. But if you try to split wood with it, it hits and sinks and it sticks. And if you got a hard spot in the wood, it doesn't like to flex any, and it chips out. And I've seen axes that were sharpened a lot to get them very thin for a limbing axe. And this is where in like put wooding and things, where the tree would be dropped with a chainsaw, and then this individual went up the tree taking all the limbs off against the bark as close as they could, so they could buck it up in pieces to load it on the truck. And so those axes were very thin edge, very, very sharp, and etc. But if you ever tried to split wood, walk straight into something thick, it just stuck. And if you hit anything really, really hard, it'd chip out too easy, and you'd end up looking at the edge and it like saw teeth where pieces were coming out of it. So it's a razor sharp axe is great for show, but unless it's a limbing axe, cutting off limbs, it's not a good choice for having as an actual field tool for splitting wood, fire prep, that type of deal. That's just my 2 cents. Baloo, do you know how to tame a bird? The only bird I've ever had was a cockatiel, and I do not know. Chickens and things like that I grew up with as kids, turkeys and stuff like that were in the barnyard type stuff. It was not a pet, and so I'm afraid I don't have that kind of experience. Hello, snappers. Glad you made it. Mike, not tying is a perishable skill. That's true. Remembering how it goes. But that's the reason I recommend learn 5 knots. 5. Okay. Be able to do a square knot. Be able to do a bowline. Be able to do a trucker's hitch and variation out of locking trucker's hitch. You know, a taut line hitch, and be able to do like a lark's head or something like that. You do those 5 and you'll handle 90% of what you're going to encounter out there in the real world. Yeah, there are other knots that may be in this situation slightly better, but for the most part, 5-10 knots is all you really need to focus on. And once you get going good with them, then the rest of it becomes just add on. And I've got friends that they love to be knot masters. They love to learn to tie all these super complicated and etc. ones, and monkey's fists and everything else. And I tell them, that's great, but what's the practical application? Well, you make this to do it. It's decorative, right? Could I do something far simpler? I'm very much a common man, plain English. Let's just use what works. And the real fancy knots, I know a few, and I do them when they're necessary. But it's normally where I found the 10 or 12 knots that I was really good with may have not served the purpose real well. So I need to go up. It's like when I went to doing the soft shackles I've used for years. But then when I figured out to do the twist to the soft shackle, so that all I got to do is I can take this and open it up and stick something in it, and it wants to close back up by itself. And so I could like attach this to the top of a pack and stick a handkerchief or a coat or something in here, and it'll hold it. It'll twist itself up like a bungee. At the same time, I can go around something, and if I just open up the head and go over that knot and let it twist itself back up like that, that'll hold, for quick. I'm just going to hold a few minutes and take it right back off. Or if I take it and I open up below the knot and I go through, and then I come back over the top, over the knot, and pull. Now that's a locked knot. That don't come off. It's got to break. And that lock I got from Dan Lutz. We were talking about it, and he said, yeah, but you're not locking it. I said, what do you mean lock? And he showed me how to do that. I would always just made it where it went over, and I had a slider or something to go up and cinch it. He said, no, you just bring it over the top and hook it. It locks. And then we came up with the twist. You learn, you keep evolving, and you find improvements. So this makes a multi-use item. And I'm going to show how to make these again in one of the coming skills videos. But knots is one of the main things that it's how we attach everything. It's how we construct everything. It's how you got to have a good working idea of knot. Mike Bolton, I wonder if you could live stream a compass orienteering course. I doubt it. That's very in-depth. Now, could I do a compass course and have somebody videotape me doing it? Yeah. When I do my gathering next year, and I will make the announcement of when, the date of it, at the end of December, right after Christmas. Because I've got to judge right now. Our weather is looking a certain way. I've got to judge it, give a date, so that I'm trying to avoid mosquitoes being hatched out, and yet the cold and nasty weather's gone. And there's like a 2 or 3 week window normally between them where it's nice weather. It's cool enough at night you enjoy a fire, and the day is warm enough you don't have to wear a heavy coat. But the bugs ain't out yet. And that's what I'm trying to target. But out there at the lake, not there at the lake where we hold it at Geneva State Forest, I found an area and that I can easily run a compass course on, and was talking to the ranger about it, us setting up a compass course up there. So I may run a compass class for the my gathering. We'll do a improvised compass class. I'll do the class of navigation with nothing, and then we'll do a set you up with a compass class and let you run it and try it, and I'll get people to videotape what we're doing. So hopefully that'll help answer a bunch of questions. Gustav, any thoughts on Pathfinder School in Ohio? Dave Canterbury's operation was thinking about taking basic course. He puts on a really good school. He's got really good instructors. Practice your skills before you go. I suggest you contact them and say, what do I need to know when I walk in the door? And they'll be honest with you. Matt Mercer, Sean Kelly, any of those guys, I'm friends with all of them. And it's better to have a good working knowledge, because when you get there, he's going to put you under a little bit of stress. And he's going to give you some teaching, and he's going to put you under a little bit of stress to perform with it. So have a good basic knowledge before you go. That's my advice. But it's a worthwhile gathering. It's a worthwhile school, I should say. And he's got a very good setup up there. Okay. Sorry, guys. Hang on. I'm just reading. Travis, glad you enjoyed the black powder revolvers. Forrest Gnome, sharpen one side of a double bit axe, one side for splitting and one side for cutting. Correct. A grubbing edge. That's where my axe is. It's got a really sharp edge on one side. That's the limbing side, the cutting side. The other side's a little blunter, and that's the grubbing edge and splitting edge on mine. Washburn, time for the fly rod. I understand. I use a fly rod. Pretty much my favorite rod and reel is a fly rod. But I'm not doing the classic fishing like you do, like you see out west of them out in the stream doing the stuff. Down here in the south, it's called splat fishing. And it's basically a cane pole with a reel. I use the fly line, and then you've got the regular old fishing line as your actual tippet. And do quite a bit of that. That's one of my favorite. Taking a canoe and getting in a small creek and working one. Just love that. Michael Fitzell, what's your opinion of the Polanski axe? I'm afraid I don't know which one you're talking about. There's a lot of them out there, and I'm afraid that one just doesn't pop to mind. Sorry. Joshua, you found this by looking for stuff from 1860. Glad you found us. Farrell, what I use a Suntoe Ranger, a little bitty small Suntoe Ranger that's got a top thing on it that covers it with a mirror in it, is what I usually use for my navigation. Navigation needs to be as accurate as you need, but does not need to be any more accurate than you really require. Now, I know that sounds counterintuitive, but let me explain. The military is trying to train you to hit a specific 3-foot square, 1 meter target. And so you have to be very precise in how you call in and how you coordinate, etc. For personal navigation, I don't need anything near that kind of depth. I need direction, and I need to keep me on the proper heading where I can keep my paces and etc., and then use landmarks to work my way in. So I can be a lot coarser. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where the military has to be 10, I can get by with like a 6 or an 8, usually a 6, to get me, because where are you going? I'm going to this particular valley, this particular overlook, or this particular junction of this creek, this river. And so I can dial it in and be close and find my target easily. Whereas doing the heavy stuff, I've done the heavy stuff. I did orienteering and stuff like that. And thank you very much, Fred. And it's kind of overkill sometimes. It's just how degree you need and where you're at. If you're out west and you're in them big old mountains, yeah, you need navigation a lot more. But at the same time, if you're in more open country, you can get away with a little bit less. And so I'll cover navigation again pretty soon. If you look in my playlist, I have a thing talking about how I was taught to use a compass and read a map and do navigation that way, and how you can practice it a little bit. Sean, good evening. Blackie, do you have a 31 or did you borrow a Bears? I'm having fun out in a little 49 pocket model 31. I borrowed Bears. What I have is the 62 pocket Navy, which is the 49 and 36. But I borrowed Bears little 31. And the 31 will do anything a 22 will do. In fact, before the 22 long rifle was invented, the 31 was kind of that job. Like we think today of what that would do. I mean, that's what that cartridge, that size was done. It was personal defense up close, and it's what people talked about using for small game stuff like that. Elmer Keith talked about carrying a 49 pocket model with a short barrel in the pocket on his chaps when he was riding a horse doing trap line, because he said you could shoot a big bobcat with it at 8 or 10 feet and do very little damage, just a small hole, but you can make precision shots. And so today we'd use a 22 for that job, but in the day the 31 did it. So I enjoyed shooting his. In fact, I want to get a 31 down the line to put into my collection. Ed, you're talking about fly fishing, that you burn more calories than fishing. No, it's really not that bad. Now, that's like the professional bass fisherman. You know, when they start talking about tournament rods, what is a tournament rod? It doesn't break easy. Normally they're stiff. But think about a guy in a professional, like sitting in a tournament. He's up on the bow of the boat and it's moving at a half mile an hour, and he's sitting there fast as he can cast over and over again. If it ain't in the water, you're not doing nothing. So it's reel in, cast again, reel in. He'll do hundreds of casts in an hour, and that's just whipping that rod back and forth. Eventually it delaminates and cracks. So a tournament grade rod has got a little bit more backbone to it, so it doesn't snap off as easy. It really isn't as good, as sensitive as another rod, but the off the shelf sensitive rods won't hold up to that constant whipping and will break easy. So that's where that comes from. Me watching a pro bass guy, you know, I used to go to Lake Eufaula quite a bit, and they had a whole lot of bass tournaments up there. And you'd see these guys going by, and you know, I kept count one day. I threw out there and I'm slowly reeling in and doing stuff, and they pulled up and they were there maybe 40 minutes. And he cast at least, you know, somewhere around 5 to 7 times a minute, which is, you know, like less than 10 seconds it was in the water. He's throwing it out there and reeling like crazy and throwing it out there. And I'm thinking, dang, that guy's going to be wore out by the end of the day, because they're going sun up to sun down. So that, I mean, that's too much work, you know. Oh, I got you the fire axe. That's what I call it, the fire axe. Yeah, they use that for firefighting and stuff like that. It's got a little hoe on it type deal. And there was a military version that had a handle that had head attachments that would put on to. I remember those as well. The one that I'm familiar with, it was the military type that had the attachments, awful heavy. Good for splitting, but you get tired with it. But as far as the actual firefighter one, it's got the hole in the back. They're fairly nice. Haven't had any use for them down here, but I know what you're talking about. Is there a way to get a full land nav map for the U.S.? Yes, there is. Oh boy. Is it US Gov Maps? I think it's US Gov Maps, I believe is the thing. And they have online all the topo maps of the entire United States. You just go there, you zone in, go where to it, and pick it. And you can buy online the map, and they will send it to you through the mail, or you can simply just print the page. That's what I tell a lot of people to do. Zone in, get it. You know, it's got all the topographic, you know, all your contour lines and everything else. I want to say it's usgov.maps. That's what I think it is. It's been several years since I've done that. But you can then print it off. And I've told people, if you're going to this place, print off a map, you know, just run you off. If it's just that big and it's showing the main things, so that you got something to navigate from if you get turned around out there, you want to navigate cross country. You just need direction and what the terrain is going to be doing, so you can track yourself through it. And those are easy to get. Fred, where do you go to get low price camping gear? Usually after Christmas. Okay, here's a little tip for you. Usually after Christmas, look at Sportsman's Guide. A lot of times they'll get rid of a lot of last year's camping stuff and things like that because they got new stuff coming in. But they're not going to do that before Christmas because they're trying to do it. So somewhere along the end of February, early March, Walmart, some of the big retailers and stuff, that's when you'll see a lot of the camping gear suddenly get put on sale and stuff like that to reduce the price. I worked for several years for Walmart and sporting goods and camping gear. And I would tell people that if you're looking for a kayak, do not get a kayak in the spring. Get it in the dead of winter. Looking like September, October, the price would suddenly drop for just a week or two online, and then it would come back up. So get in the opposite season time and start looking. And that's when stuff pops up. Of course, eBay as well is a good way if there's some particular piece of gear that you're looking for. And of course, like you said, garage sales and stuff. It depends on where you're at, what's going to be. You know, me being near a military base, I'd go to yard sales and there's all this military gear. You know, you'd have Alice packs and boots and, you know, Kaminga compasses and everything else. And of course, you know, like canteens, canteen cups everywhere because people had got it. And back in the day, whenever I was, you know, doing this stuff, a lot of your GIs, you had the official set. And that was your official set of uniforms, your official piece of field kit, all your, you know, Alice pack and everything else. And that was pristine. You never took that to the field. It stayed packed up and stuck in a closet for inspection. The one that you actually carried was the one that was used, you picked up off base from somebody else. It had holes in it, it had whatever, and you used it in the field. And that way, when they were going to do an inspection, you brought out the pretty one and you didn't get docked for having dirty gear or whatever. And then whenever you retired, you sold off all your field gear that was that extra piece, dirty piece, whatever. And you had a little wear on it. Yeah, a lot of times it had a lot of wear on it. But you get it dirt cheap, too, because they were getting rid of it. So that would be a good source of it. Gray Wolf, correct. That actually is part of the Pioneer set. Engineers had them. Sometimes you'd see them on tanks. And I believe EOD, I think, had them as well. Seem to recall EOD using them. USGS map store, correct. U.S. Geological Survey, that's it. Thanks, guys. And I've also pointed out that when you're going to camp someplace or etc., and you've never been there before, go look up on Google Maps or something, go take a look at it. See what the terrain looks like and etc. Take your phone, get it in there, and what if you got a computer? A lot of people don't have computers anymore. Everything's on their phone. They live on their phone. But I want to be able to print off a picture. So I go and pull it out far enough that I can see the whole land. You know, this is where we're going to be going right here. And then print off a picture with that and realize, okay, what's to the north? Well, the north is agricultural fields. What's to the east? East is this big 4-lane highway coming through. What's to the south? That's the river, and that's the candy road that I came in on. What's over here on this side? There's a housing division out here. So that kind of boxes me in. So when I get in them woods, if I get completely turned around, you know, what road did I come in on? South. All I got to do is head south, and I'm going to hit that road. So that's how you box yourself in. Even if that box is 20 miles across, you know, at least you have a working knowledge because you're not truly lost. You just don't know what's over there. But if you have a working knowledge of what's all the way around you, even if it's fairly far out, you've got at least an idea of how to navigate inside the box, you know. Washburn, Billy, in the smaller streams, a fly rod is king because if you can cast, you'll lose a fly. Exactly. We roll cast. I get about, say 10 feet on the end of the out on the rod and just roll cast. So it rolls and flips forward. I'm in a lot of creeks and things that you've got like 30 foot wide, and the canopy is hanging down within 6-8 feet of you. So you're pitching sidearm underneath, and you have to shorten up line fairly short. A lot of times when I'm in that canoe, I'm doing within like 10-15 feet of the canoe. I'm just lightly flipping, you know. And I prefer an automatic retracting reel, like my granddaddy got me stuck on that. Had Mitchell, I think it was, an automatic reel. And I've got one. And only when I'm in like on the edge of a lake where I'm wide open am I actually going to do the classic, you know, working it where you work it out 25, 30 feet out, and etc. Because most time you're in such a tight place, you just want to roll it. And you get a lot more strikes that way because you can kind of focus it in on it a little bit more. Gustav, recommendations for field shovel, military folding, straight handle. If you have to dig a lot, a straight handle is the way to go. And a long handle will save your back. If that is not, you know, I have to carry a compact shovel. The military uses the folding shovel for the obvious reasons of it allows your soldiers to be able to dig into a position quickly without having to tote a full-size shovel. However, if you have to dig a lot, you're going to want a full-size shovel real quick, because being bent over or on your knees and all like that just tears your back up. And that's the reason that anybody that's digging for a long amount of time is going to have a full-length shovel, or at least one of those T-handle shovels. You know what I'm talking about? You grab top of the handle. So in my vehicle, I carry a military folding shovel because I'm not expecting to have to. But then that's at Cold Steel, like Soviet shovel, I've got one of them. I've got the German. I really like the German version, which has that big bolt you push in and you can fold the blade, and it's got a Maddox pick on the back of it. I'm in a place that has hard red clay, and whenever it's a hot summer and it's dry, it's like trying to dig concrete. You bring that pick down, it hits, and it goes like a ½ inch in the dirt with everything you can do. It's like trying to bust through concrete. That's the best analogy I can give you. So in that, I want the biggest, baddest thing I can get. And that German folding shovel is heavy, straight handle. It's heavy, but you can chop with it. You can split wood with it. You can do whatever. And so if I'm hauling that, I'm planning on digging. What are we doing? What gear do we need? You know, I'm not hauling a bunch of gear that I don't need. For a bug out bag in my vehicle, I have that folding shovel, military type, so that I can entrench out, dig out, or whatever I got to do. I'm not planning on doing it, so this is the fallback, you know, something to have. Joshua, have a good night. Yeah, Forrest Num said you looked at GPS while you were at Geneva Lake and almost ended up in Wisconsin. Yeah. Farrell, you need a clear bank to cast, not flip. Correct. And the problem down here is we've got so many trees, so much overhang. And if you bring one over your head, you're going to guarantee hook up on something. So we do a lot of sidearm down here because we do have so many trees along the banks and water edges doing like that. It's only when you can get someplace that's cleared out where you've got 10, 15 yards, you know, along the edge where you can really work a fly rod like you see them out there in this, like the Western idea, the classic fisherman standing out in the stream and standing there working it. I've done that too. But I will also tell you that more than once I had been standing out there in waist deep water and had a gator cruise by too. So, you know, sitting there waving that in the water, sending ripples through your body into the water is kind of also attracting more than just fish. So it's where you're at. I love them noodling shows. Those guys go and they stick their arm up in a hole, and I'm going, they ain't in Alabama. We got gators. I would have no interest in going noodling and standing in the stream anymore, because when I was a kid, you didn't hardly ever see a gator. They were very few and far between, but now they're common. And the population has really recovered, and the world record alligator came out of Alabama, and it was just shy of 20 feet long and right out of ton. It's like 19 feet, 10 inches, and 2,000 pounds. And there's some big ones down here. In fact, the river I go to, right down here, Choctawhatchee River, had a lady back, I think it was 3 years ago. She had 150 something pound Malamute, and she would take him down there to the river and let him run along the water's edge and, you know, chase fish or whatever type deal. And she'd got down there and the dog had trotted down to the water's edge, and that gator leaped out and took it in one hit. She saw it, hit it, crushed the dog, turned and dove back in. It didn't even hardly make sense. The dog didn't even whimper because its jaws hit it and just crushed it. It was at least like a 15, 16 footer. And that 150 pound dog just went, that was it. So yeah, fly fishing. Yeah, you got to, down here, you got to look around. Start looking to make sure nothing else is popping up and, you know, hunting air while you're fishing. One reason I like a canoe, I like a wall. You know, I tried a kayak this year, sold it the day I tried it. That was Mr. Kingsbury ended up with that canoe that day. I told him, brother, it's yours. Here it is. We made a deal on the spot because I just did not like a kayak. Yeah, gray wolf, big old turtles. Yeah, we got snapping turtles that'll remove a thumb cleaner than a surgeon. I had a friend of mine when I was like in, I don't know if I remember if I was in high school yet or it was ninth grade, but he was sitting on the bow of a John boat floating down the river and had his feet in the water. He was barefoot. And that turtle took the big toe off of his left foot and just, he was gone. I was in a canoe back behind him. And his brother was in the boat running the motor. And they were just floating. And he was sitting with his legs out in the water and was working a little rod. And they went over a deeper hole, and that turtle come up and just grabbed that toe and took it clean off. And of course he screamed and he fell back in the boat. And, you know, the initial thought is his leg hooked something under the water, you know, like a fishing line, a snag or something, and bent his leg backwards. And no, we got up there and looked at it, and you could see where the turtle had just taken it clean off. And it was a pinch. And so, yeah, they dang it, you don't dingle dangle fingers and stuff down in holes. There's things down in there that eat. Yeah, Fred, you understand what I'm talking about? Gators. Yeah, Steve, big toes are just spare thumbs. Yep. Yeah, William Henley, Jerry Clower's story about fishing with dynamite. Yeah, and that did go on quite a bit, where people would throw a quarter stick of dynamite or something in, go boom, and shock all the fish, and they'd come up and you take your net and get all the fish out of there. So that did go on during the hard times because you're trying to feed a family. Bear says that record gator was caught by a 12-year-old girl in the Tennessee Delta north of Mobile. We call it the Delta down here, and it's the second largest delta in the U.S. Only the Mississippi is bigger, and that's right above Mobile, Alabama, that big mess up in there. I had talked to Dan Lutz. He wanted to see swamp, and so me and him were going to go down there, and I was going to take him canoeing and camp out, because what it is, they came in and they dug out and made the Tennessee Tom Bigby waterway so barge traffic could go all the way up to the Tennessee River and etc. from the Gulf. In doing so, they cut off the main river channel, and that whole area down there, which is like 60, 70 miles wide and maybe 100 miles long, is nothing but old river channels, swamps, etc. And it's tidal. So the high tide backs up in the bay and brings it up. So at high tide, you're in the canoe looking up at the bank and you're like 4 foot down from the top. At low tide, you're 8 foot down, you know, and it's old black goo that you really can't climb up that bank. And it's just a mess, and he wanted to see swamp. I said, I'll show you swamp. And then after I had started talking seriously about it, and one day he contacted me and said, nope, 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 I am not coming down there. We're not doing that. I went, why? And that's when he pointed out the new state record had been taken down there with world record alligators. Oh, yeah, they're big, huge gators and snakes in there, dude. I have seen a turtle shell, no lie. There used to be at Baymonette, Alabama, there was a little mom and pop gas station, and nailed to the side of the building were these 3 foot across turtle shells, 3 of them that they had caught back there in that swamp. A 3 foot across turtle. I don't know what species it was or whatever, but it was a 3 foot. They just had the shells mounted. But there's dinosaurs back in there. I swear, it's a real place to go if you want to try your skills. Go in there, because all it is channels, swamps, and islands. And so you can it's public access, park, put in, start going. And but you better know your navigation. You better be good with the compass. You can read a map real well. And you better be really, really good at climbing, because you're going to do a lot of climbing up and down on banks and going in there to find places to camp. It's going to be a challenge. Have we decided what Bear's first video might be? Well, Bear's actually shot a little bit of stuff and got for me to edit, and I am looking at that now, and I hope to have that back to him by the first of the week. So by the end of the month, Bear will have his official thing, his official channel, and we will be still doing stuff together. We were going to go squirrel hunting the other day, but life got in the way, and that's just how life is. And so as soon as we can, me and him going to be going out and probably doing a hunt of some kind together to go on the Bear's channel. We shall see. Yeah, that pluff mud. Yeah. Black, stinky mud. It feels kind of like grease. It really does stink. God, it stinks. Right. Steve talks about it, that they're muck holes. And especially where you'll have it's not truly quicksand, okay? But what it is you'll have a silt layer. And usually what happens is it's in a bend or something like that, and you're going to have a heavy silt layer where leaves piled up and made a great big huge pile. And then it got covered in sand. Well, they decay, rot down, and etc. And this goo, I mean, literally, guys, it's like pudding. It's just this goo. And the top looks solid. And you go to walk across that, and suddenly you just go to your waist. Whop, you just go through it. If not deeper. The water was like maybe 1.5 feet deep. And I have stepped into one of them holes and went up to where my head was just under the water. Just like you stepped into a telephone pole hole. And then you can't hardly break the suction and get back out, because it grabs a hold of you. And it's kind of like, you can't pull out because you make a suction. It's more mud than water. And so you got to just start twisting. That's what you got to keep your mind. Just start doing like that and start twisting yourself back up until you open it up big enough to get enough water in there to get yourself out of it. But people will drown. They'd step off and drown. Yeah, I remember hearing about that, about guy being in Alaska, and it was said they pulled him in half trying to lift him with a helicopter. Kind of a bad way to try to do something. The bottom line is he's stuck by suction, so you can break the suction. There's other ways to break the suction. Like I said, start wallering out around them bigger and bigger, because the suction is the mud. So if you kind of liquefy and move the mud out where it's more water than mud, you got water up here or whatever, you get down in there. You just got to dissolve it. It's physics is what's going on. Oh yeah. Gray Wolf talking about I walked out onto a sandbar that was actually cottonwood that was floating up against a sweeper. Yeah, you just break right through. We did a lot of canoeing when I was young, and it would look like an island. It might even have little trees growing on it, little bitty 18, 20-inch saplings and things like that. And what it was actually was a floating debris bed that had got kind of trapped here and there's water flowing underneath it. And you go to walk around on top of that thing and you find a thin spot and go. We had a rather tragic case where a mother and a child drowned back in the late 70s. That I remember of that, where the child got up on the thing, kind of like sanding on the edge. They're going up the river, and she stopped, let the kid out on the sand, I guess, go use the bathroom or something. I don't know. And she got out either to help the child or to get the child, and she went through and got sucked underneath due to the hydraulic pressure and was trapped underneath that island and drowned. And so the husband or whoever was in the back of the boat, it's like you went through a hole in the ice. You and gone and couldn't get out. They were pinned. And so, of course, by the time they got rescuers out there several hours later, and they got a diver to go down in there, and the diver came back and said, you can't get to them. It's probably about 18 inches of water flowing under it, and they've been sucked under. There's nothing they can do. And I remember they had to bring in a cable, steel cable, and ran it from one bank to the other to like two big pieces of equipment, and would just pull and try to tear it up until they finally could recover the body. And it took them like 2 days to recover the body. It was like going through a hole in the ice up north, went through and trapped underneath water. There's always some way to die. That's one thing when you get out there and you start looking at it. And I pointed out chuck holes, we call them, where you're in, especially in pine forest, and you've had a pine tree die, and the body rotted out and left the bark, and the pine straw has folded over the top of it, and it looks just like flat ground. You don't see nothing. And then you step in it, and you're at a normal walk, you're at a full clip, and your leg goes down into a 12-inch diameter or whatever hole, and you go all the way to the hip. Well, you're going forward, and it normally snaps your leg about the middle of your thigh, because it, your body weight going forward. You can't catch yourself quick enough, and you're falling down and forward at the same time. And it snaps the leg. So I've stepped in them, but been lucky. I reacted quick enough and was able to, kind of bow up, snatch a knee up and bow up, and not break a leg. But me and Bear were out there on his land. In fact, I showed in the video where I was talking about chuck holes that we found one on his land that looked perfectly camouflaged, couldn't see it. And then once I went to digging out in it, it was 2 or 3 foot deep, but starting out, it was leaves and pine straw, perfectly flat, perfect trap. Oh yeah, Gustav, the Eglin Air Force Base Ranger School. Yep, that's been I know quite a few Rangers that have had a lot of fun at that place. Hello, Tennessee Smoky. Thanks for coming. Thank you very much. B ended up with Bears haversack. Okay. William Henley, have a good night. Yes, to all the veterans, thank you very much for your service. Yes, Pam, Mr. Walker is right. You use a walking stick. I often will carry a walking stick, especially in unfamiliar ground or things like that. Like I've said, if I've got a lot of, bushes and stuff where you can't see the ground real well, I'll swish it back and forth in front of me in case there's a snake. It'll wake him up. Usually the snake will strike out of reflex, and he's asleep, and I just stomp right next to him. I didn't step on him, but I stomped right next to him, and he woke up, and there's a brown boot, and he strikes out of reflex. I've had that several times. And so by doing that, I'll wake them up. And you're not sure about the ground test. If you're crossing water, absolutely have a stick if it's going to be waist deep or less, so I can stab on bottom before I find that deep hole. Because you're going along and it's great, and then there's a channel, and you suddenly step off in 10-foot deep water when you thought, man, it's just ankle deep all the way across here. Tick, 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 tick. Whoa, wait a minute. Yeah. Always carry a big stick. Yeah, agree. Well, if you're calling a in deep snow, yeah, where you've had a tree or whatever, and now you got several feet of snow, and it's a chuck hole like we have. It's just different conditions. At least it'll melt. But yeah. How did the Viet Cong avoid falling into their own traps? They actually had a pretty complicated system of marking where they would bend um, foliage and things and create a symbol for you to know. Because when we got Kit Carson scouts, which were Viet Cong that changed sides to our side, and they would show us how they would mark punji pits and how they would mark other man traps so that we knew to avoid them. And they were invaluable, especially when we started doing the underground stuff where they had blind pits, they had snakes that were put into bamboo where the 2/3 of the snake was free and the back part is stuck in a piece of bamboo, and that was mounted to the ceiling so that you came forward and it would be up in the ceiling. Literally, they cut a groove up there where the snake would be laying up in there and you couldn't see it. And so as you crawled along, it would strike you. And they had little marks and stuff they would put. So they did have a communication system to keep their own people from stepping on it. It's just we didn't learn it till late in the war. Really interesting thing, if you're interested in Vietnam history, the Marine Corps, every unit that left had to publish in it was something kind of like a newsletter that was called Lessons Learned. And it was where the Marines that were leaving, what information would they impart to you coming in? And a lot of that dealt with the punjies. They would carry half of a hacksaw blade and a pair of small vice grips. And they could put that into a compass pouch. And why would you carry that? It's because if they had one of the metal barbed punji that you'd step on it, harpoon through your foot, you couldn't pull your foot off of it. It would just destroy the foot. But you could hacksaw it off. So they'd take that short pair of vice grips and all and clamp on that half thing and be able to saw it off and get you to the medic where they could go in surgically and just push it on through and just have a hole that they could fix, so to speak, as opposed to ripping muscle and everything else out. They would also talk about carrying forceps, because if someone got hit in a major artery, you could stick it in the hole and clamp it. But a good friend of mine was a Marine, and he had quite a few of those. It was Lessons Learned. And if you're interested in Vietnam history, be a good read. All them things. I'm sure that probably the Library of the Marine Corps got them. Thank you, Mopar, for your service. Yeah, and happy birthday to the Marine Corps. I understand it's their birthday today. Correct, Gray Wolf. It's amazing how much we got to keep relearning in the military. When World War One happened, we virtually did not have a sniper school anywhere in the military, and we needed them. And so they went and grabbed a lot of the guys that had been on the rifle teams and used them. Well, the problem with it is those were guys were good at shooting at stationary targets at long range and weren't necessarily the best choice for snipers. But they dial that in. Well, we learned all that the hard way in World War One, and then just as soon as the war was over, they got rid of the sniper school, and we went right back to where we were. So when we entered World War II, we didn't have any cadre of snipers. and had to reinvent the wheel again. And then we got rid of them, and we had to reinvent them for Korea and for Vietnam and Desert Storm. So yeah, they'd have quote snipers, and it'd be a handful, but they didn't have it set up where they could set up a school and things like that. There's a lot of things where the military goes, oh, we don't need it next time. I remember when they talked about they'd never need guns on a fighter aircraft anymore because everything was going to be missiles only. I remember when they talked about that we would not need infantry anymore because the Air Force was going to do all the fighting. Yeah. We didn't need the Navy anymore. We just needed transport aircraft because fighter jets would be able to cross the ocean from land base and would not need any kind of that to do fire suppression, etc. So, yeah, they keep relearning the wheel over and over again. B, Blackie, have you thought about opening your own school to teach us your ways of survival in bushcraft stuff? I have. To be honest, I have thought about doing a school or at least doing seminars. And up until this year, it wasn't really feasible because I was working a full-time job. But now that I am kind of self-supportive off of my YouTube, etc., I have thought about doing a seminar. And like I said, this coming year, when we do my gathering, I will do a compass class, and we'll do navigation with nothing, and then we'll do some compass work. If that goes real well, I may one day be willing to do that. I've got quite a few really good people that are instructors that have told me that if I want to start a school, they'd be more than willing to work with me. A lot of guys that work in other schools already or have worked in other schools. So, and a lot of military. So, I've thought about it. We'll see. I don't know if that's the way to go, really, because schools are so expensive. One, you got to charge. Two, it's not just the price. It's also how much it costs for you to get there. If you're coming from Canada or the Pacific Northwest, you're doling out a hunk of change to come down just to spend a week with me to teach you how to do whatever. And so I think that's one of the reasons I started doing the Master Woodsman series of the books. In fact, I'm going to be doing books because I want a hard book for you to have the knowledge I want to pass on. And I wanted a video series that I could hand people and say, here you go, where I'm teaching one-on-one. But again, a lot of people want me to do a school type setting and teach, or go be part of a school and teach. And I've been approached and talked to the Woods Runner School. They've asked me several times if I'd be willing. I'm always willing to work with groups, etc. Fuel the Fire, when they went up and did things, I've been more than happy to come up and help out or teach a class, whatever. So that's probably going to happen down the horizon. We'll see. Okay, where are we at? John, good. Yeah, that Trangia cook set works very well. Get 2 Trangias, and that way you can fuel both of them up, start cooking. And if you're cooking for a bigger family and Trangia A runs out of fuel, with just a hot glove, you can quick, put and be right back in cooking. And then by the time that hot one will take 2 or 3 minutes to cool off, and you can refuel it. And so with the larger cook sets, you could keep a family, cook big meals fairly economically and quick with that. In fact, I went down to Lowe's and picked up a full gallon of the denatured alcohol for like $20, for running my Trangias, so that if times get hard, power goes out, weather gets bad or whatever, I can cook for me and the wife, no problem. And for a family cook set, I really like it. This is going to sound like sacrilege now. I love my Coleman stoves. I love to cook with my Coleman stoves. I really do. But for ease of usage, the Trangia. I mean, I got my wife one of the Swedish Trangia kits. I've got the one you see a lot of my Trangia military cooker. That's my go-to. I love to use it, immersion, heat, boil, etc. And I got one for her for the very same reason, because all she's got to know is how to stick a match in it, fire, put the lid on top. You're done. And she's able to use it. Whereas the Coleman, you've got to have fuel, you got to pump it up, you got to do all that stuff. And that gets a little too complicated for her. And so for a family stove, you can teach even the little ones how to work with a Coleman. I mean, how to work with a Trangia. So it's a really good way to go for a family set. Sage, I'm trying to learn edible medicinal plants. I don't understand why most chose to abandon and forget about it. It wasn't that they chose, it was kind of pushed that way by the medical profession, because people had home remedies, and the doctors of, say, pre-World War II era, they were trained in medical schools not only how to do medical techniques, but how to make medicine, because you're going to be posted to the backwater of wherever a lot of times, and it takes forever to get supplies in, and so you had to be able to make your own stuff. And so they were taught how to take Latuca virosa and make painkillers, how to make, various things and etc. Themselves. And so the doctor was part doctor, part apothecary. And after World War II, that kind of went away, where it's only the pharmaceutical companies are the ones who do it. And so they kind of stymied a lot of that old knowledge. And people that were still kind of practicing it, you'd have local law enforcement, you're pretending to be a doctor. I gave somebody, briar leaf tea for their upset stomach. They're pretending to be a doctor and you're practicing without a license, and they'd come after them. And so it was almost like witchcraft. And I can remember in the 1960s, a couple of black ladies that were the next street up from me. And they were the healers, so to speak. And they had big herb gardens, and they made tinctures and everything else. And I remember the law coming down there and telling them they would shut down all operations, or whether it's going to be arrested for trying to practice medicine without law, because they were just doing that types of edibles and stuff like that for people that their own family, and for people that were poor, couldn't afford to go to a doctor. They had a minor whatever. And do you have something for body aches? Do you have something for headaches? Do you have something for bee stings? Things like that. And I was sent up there by my grandmother and took a dozen and a half, I think it was, of her, oh boy, rum cookies. These were not for the children. There was a lot of rum in them cookies. But to trade to her for this mason jar of this tonic that helped my grandmother's circulation a great deal. She had very poor circulation in her feet. And everything that the doctors had prescribed had just not done nothing. And that lady's mama, who had taught her, had given my grandmother stuff years ago, and it had always helped. So she'd send me up there to get that, and she'd take a half teaspoon a day, and it would increase her circulation. So yeah, medical and herbal stuff, they just poo-pooed it. They didn't want you to do it. So it kind of died. Tennessee Smoky, old guys in the woods would be a good series of discussion. Adapting your experience to your age and health. Well, that's kind of like my Silver Wolves that I'm doing series now. For us that's got a few years on us, and tips and tricks of things we can do to keep us in the field, But yeah, it would be. Me and Bear be good at that. Yeah, Chuck Miller. Cool. Can't wait for the Nighthawk out in the woods. Fingers crossed. Everything's going according to plan right now. The last of the blackbirds is supposed to be arriving tomorrow or Monday, according to the post office, and I'll get them out immediately. The Nighthawks and that limited run, we're still on track for the 1st of December, that first week. They should to be me, and I've already got everybody's name listed out and everything, and got their envelopes ready to go. I'll stuff it and it goes out the door. So, you know, everything goes right, it's going to happen. Fred, have I done much throw line fishing? I have done hand line fishing, mostly off down here, off of river bridges, creek bridges, stuff like that. It just where you just had a hand line to throw. Yeah, I've done that quite a bit. And as long as you don't hook something really, really big, you're okay. But here to tell you, I hooked a cat one time. I had 25-pound test on, and I had it wrapped around that hand. When he took it and he took off, it cut me on both sides of my hand. So having that round reel that got the handle in the middle of it and the line goes around, yeah, that'd be the way to go. Don't hand line it. B, when's my next gathering? It will be either in the end of March or early April. I will announce the official date after Christmas. I got to judge the weather, but I will be doing it. But that's the time period, end of March, early April. Usually the last 2 weeks of March and the first 2 weeks of April, somewhere in there, due to what our weather is, where I'm going to dial it in one of those 4 weeks. Mike Bolton, how to properly read a map is yes. Don't blind follow GPS. It's a great tool. It really is. Learn how to use your phone and do that. That's fantastic. But learn how to use a map and a compass, because that electronic medium can die, fry, or run out of power. And then it's nothing but a box. I mean, it can't do much with it. But a map, as long as I can read it, I can keep going no matter what. And so to me, it's a balance. I need the technology, but I also need to have the backup to make sure it's going to dial in, you know. And I had a good friend of mine that he was big GPS, you know, when it was fairly new. And his brother had got him a hunt up in the mountains of Georgia. And so he got off work with us. We got off work at like 7 p.m. And he took off going to North Georgia. And it was going to be like 3.5 hours, right at 4 hours to get up there. And he had one of them early GPS units that's going, you know, turn left, turn right, turn left, turn right. He'd never been there before. He punched in the address and he just run along, listen to his radio, you know, turn left, turn right. And he was running down a dirt road, probably like 50 miles an hour. And what had happened was the bridge had washed out in the spring, and they had not replaced the bridge. And it's on a logging road. So when he topped the hill, there was the river. There was no warning. There was no nothing. And he was doing 70. He locked up and slid right in the river. And bridge was just gone. And he managed to go out the driver's side window as the truck drifted over and hit the far bank, and dive out and grab a hold of a limb and get up on the bank as his truck just floated out and sunk. He's late December. It's probably 34, 35 degrees. He's sopping wet. He's on the wrong bank. You know, he ain't been nowhere this. His phone has no cell signal. So he had to walk, he said, like 2 or something miles, just about freeze to death, get up altitude high enough to get a signal out. And he dialed 911, and he got this small little town's 911 service, you know, and he told him what had happened. He said, well, where are you at? He said, well, can't you just look at the GPS and tell where I'm at? He said, sir, this is a town with a population of 1,500. We don't have that kind of technology here. And the last road he remembered was an hour ago, like 8 turns back. where it's just turn left, turn right. He didn't pay attention. So he can't even tell you what road he's on. It's just that he's stuck out here in the middle of nowhere. And so by luck, he didn't freeze to death. And he managed to see a light on a pole in the distance. And he cut across a bunch of pastures and stuff like that and found this farmer's house and knocked on the door. And of course, the guy said, "I'm going to call the law." And said, "Yes, sir, please call the law. I need help." And so they got him to get out there and get him. But GPS, don't blindly trust GPS. Sage, have you ever tried growing sprouts? I have grown quite a bit of stuff like that. We used to have a kitchen at the house we lived in that had a great big bay window, and we did sprouts. We did several little spices and add-ons to put into soup, stews, and eat and stuff in a kitchen window. Yeah, you can do sprouts. You can do all kinds of stuff. Lemongrass. We did lemongrass and several other things. And we grew catnip for the cats. They loved that. Oh, yeah, but most people don't have a clue on any kind of direction. I was talking to a young person who's probably about 18 or 19 a couple of weeks ago. And I said, well, they were making a point about the weather. And I said that, well, Troy, it won't be as bad as it is here because the storm's coming off the Gulf. And they said, well, yeah, but Troy is closer to the Gulf than we are, isn't it? Troy is 40 miles farther north than I am. So they didn't even realize. I said, tell me this. And I named 4 of the big cities in the local area. I said, from here, what direction is this city? What direction is north, south, east, west? And they hadn't a clue. It's like they had no idea. People that just live in a box. John, Blackie, what are your thoughts about an unboxing video? Do they offer any benefit, or do you find a review after using something for a while more beneficial? A little of both. I had thought about, and I mentioned it to you guys, and it just didn't work out. We're not Battle Box or something like that. One of those subscription box sets had contacted me and wanted to send me a box every month as promotion for me to, do an unboxing, show the gear, and etc. And I sent back to him. I said, I have no problem looking at your gear and giving an honest review of it. If I like the gear, I will keep the gear. If I do not like the gear, I will give it away at one of my gatherings. That means bad gear. It just may not fit me, But at the same time, if it's a piece of junk, you'll see me pull it out of the box and lay it down. That's it. I am not going to promote junk. So that's up to you. If you're willing to do that, I'm willing. And they never contacted me back. So obviously they didn't have a lot of confidence about their gear. So, I don't mind doing unboxings. For a while, that was the big rage. But I prefer to actually have, before I recommend something to you, I'm going to have hands-on with it. I mean, I'd bring out and show you, hey, we got the new such and such. I just got it in, I'll talk about that. But then I'll give you a follow-up a couple of months later or whatever and tell you what I think of it. I've done that for the Pathfinder bush pot and several other pieces of gear that I've had long-term now and what I've done with them and how I've liked them or whatever. And knives and things that I picked up, what I think about it 6 months later. And keep doing it. I prefer to have hands-on. But even then, I realize, I can look at someone gave me this knife, and this is a Rough Rider, and it's little of an upgrade, very nice knife. And I like it. I think it's a nice knife. Is it a great bushcraft knife? No. But as a pocket knife, yeah, I could see that for a slightly larger pocket knife. I've got a lot of experience with a slightly larger pocket knife, so I carried this for a couple of days in my pocket and utilized it, get a good feel with it, etc. And I like it. I like the wide design, etc. So it's a good knife, for that. Now, do I have a much higher quality knife? Yes, absolutely. But it's not a bad knife. It's a good knife. Okay. And that's the way I tend to look at all gear that people want me to review or whatever. I come at it from the idea of the guy that's just starting out. If I handed this to them, would it be an advantage or a disadvantage? A lot of it would be a disadvantage because the quality wouldn't be there. They'd break it easy. And I just have to be honest and say that. On the other hand, if it is like that, that's a good knife and would be a good pocket knife to utilize. And another person had given me, because I collect sabers, and gave me a saber Granddaddy Barlow. Okay. A Granddaddy Barlow is a folding Mora knife. It's the same size as a Mora. And if I take a Mora and hold it up, that I've showed several times in videos, side and side, they're the same size. There's like a quarter of an inch different in length, and that's it at the cutting edge of this. And a Mora knife. This is a good piece of steel. So would you be okay with doing early starting out bushcraft or carving or whatever, as long as you respect the fact it's a folding knife, it's got a good spring on it, and it's got a catch there to keep you from closing it on your hand. But as long as you respect the folding knife, yeah, I would have no problem starting out with somebody that's learning to sit there and show them how to do cuts and stuff with this. It's not expensive, but it's proper for what we're doing. See, would I hand that to an expert and say, great knife? No, because, it's a good knife. Good for what it's doing, good at jobs. But would it be the first choice if I was going to be dumped in the middle of nowhere and that's the only knife I got for 6 months? No. And that's just honesty, Edgar, what do you think about putting a sail on a canoe? Can be a lot of fun. But, okay, understand. What you see above the water of a sail mounted onto some sort of mast is leverage. What you don't see is you need a keel board, which is normally a slit in the bottom of the canoe that a board slides down to counteract the force of the top, leaning over. And if you just put a sail up on a canoe, it's going to turn you over unless you're going in line with the canoe, which means like if this was the canoe, if I put the sail this way so the wind blows it this way, great. But if you try to tack it or you go sideways, it just rolls it. A canoe has good longitudinal strength, but it has very little side-to-side strength, so you can't go sideways in it. I've been out in lakes and stuff before and took a paddle and put up a poncho onto it and held it up and let it catch the wind and let it blow me right across the lake, and then take off. That's fun. But if you're going to try to turn a canoe into a sailboat, you got to have that keel board somehow or something going down to counteract that leaning. Otherwise, it's just going to roll over. And ask me how I figured that out in about 35 feet of water in a fully loaded canoe. Gordon, do I like to trap? I have not trapped. When I was a teenager, I did. I ran a little trap line. I was doing it for meat. I was never a hide person going for it because at the time that I was getting into that, there was no money in it for possums, coons, or whatever. So I was going for meat. And so I have not trapped in years and years and years and years. I was never a trapper. I understood the trapping skill, and I was going specifically for small game like rabbits, coons, things like that. I was never going for any of the money things, etc. And it was strictly for food is what I was doing. So I'm not what you'd call a trapper. That was Dan Lutz. He was the master trapper. Good night, B. Thank you. 133 rip. Yes, Rough Rider is a good knife for the money. It really is. I have said in videos before that I have case knives. I have my grandfather's case knife, my father's case knife, and my case knife that Daddy gave me when I turned 16. I don't tote them in the swamps. I don't tote them in the woods. I'm toting my SAK, and then I'll probably tote a Saber or an old timer or something like that, or a Rough Rider. The Rough Rider for the money is a good knife. Holds an edge well, good walk and talk, and etc. Less than $25 on average. And if something screws up and you lose it, you're not out a lot, as opposed to those guys that want to have a $200 pocket knife and then you lay it down and walk off. You laid it down on the stump and went on down the bank to fish. And then later that night, when you're back home, you stick your hand in your pocket and figure out you left your knife out there. That's heartrending to think I just lost something like that. Worm Wrangler, the more you know, the less you need. True. And like I have said before, the more you know, the less BS you carry. You will find how this can do 4 other jobs. And so I can carry less gear. It isn't the more you know, the less you carry. The more you know, the less BS you carry. How do I feel about cast net? Fantastic if you've got schools and things, a lot of the ponds and holes. Down here in my part of the South, in August was usually dry. Now this weather pattern has started changing the last 5-7 years. But we had our wet months were February up through, say, beginning of June. And then it just dried out. Well, by August and September, the river got down low and you'd see pools. So the average depth of the river out here is maybe a foot or less, 6 inches. And then you'd have a hole the size of a 18-wheeler trailer where the water would be like 4 or 5 feet deep or a foot deep or 2 feet deep, etc. And cast nets, a lot of guys, and I've had cast nets, go in there and sling them into those deep holes. And because you know where the fish are going to be, they're going to be in the holes. So throw in them cast nets and let them sink down. And I'm close enough to the Gulf that guys would go down here to the inlets and things, go for mullet and stuff like that with casting nets. I only had a small one. I had an 8-footer that I played with back in the 80s for catching bait fish and for catching small edible fish. And so it can be a very viable way, especially if you've got concentrations of fish, schools of fish. Great way to fill up a cooler. Right. Steve Kingsbury talking about putting a dagger board, which is something to counteract. You got to have something going down the water to counteract that sail. Otherwise, it's just going to roll you over. Yeah, some sort of rudder or some way to steer it. My idea when I was playing with it was I rigged up a mast about 6 foot up, and I put like a 4-foot sheet sail on it with a solid bar across the bottom. And I had the idea that I would have lines hooked to the corner where I could slide the sheet, so to speak. It worked great going out because the wind was coming at like this angle to me. And so I just turned the sail and cut it, and yonder I went. But when I tried to turn around, and the wind hit that sail sideways and we went over. So you've got to have some sort of counter to it, and you got to have some way to steer. And you're stopped being a canoe at that point. You become a small little skiff or something like that. So. Yeah, Forrest on putting 2 canoes together with crossbow. Yeah, you can do that because then it becomes a set of outriggers. Yes, having a good skinning knife for your kid or something that you have confidence skinning with. Growing up poor, I learned to skin with a small game with a pocket knife. And so I've always got a pocket knife on me. But having a small skinning blade, especially when you're going to try to live off the land a lot. You're going to be doing a lot of shoot, heat, and eats. If it's fish, have a small fillet knife. One of them folding fillet knives is great. Makes your life so much better. Having a small skinning knife, something I can control, especially for small game or stuff, or even for like dove, where I just remove the feathers off the breast and split it and bring the breast meat out without having to do a lot of work. Things like that. Make sure the tool makes life a lot easier. Tennessee Smoky, use chapstick on your carpet. Yes, wax. It'll do very good. A black ox knife. I seem to recall them, that maker of knife, Black Ox. It shouldn't affect the meat. Should be fine, you know. Make sure it's just clean to begin with. And you got to remember, guys, pigs are nasty. Their hide, especially like my wild boars down here, they're laying in sand a lot. And you know how you can lay on something, it kind of gets embedded in on your skin. Well, pigs will actually, it'll like grow in and be in their skin. And what I used to use to gut a pig was a box cutter. One of them, you get those big blades and replace it, because you get a cut and it's dull as butter because there's so much sand and crud and crap in that 3/4 inch thick hide that it just dull it. And I'd save my knife once I get inside. So I'd kind of get my cuts where I could peel into it. And then I get in here and start like cutting on the inside. And I would skin it basically. Then once I got on the inside where I could use my knife to skin with. Whereas you think of like cleaning something else where you're going to rip the hide in long line and peel back. Just skin the hide off the pig, unless you're wanting to do a lot of work and you're going to smoke it or something. You want that big thick hide. I don't even bother scraping them or whatever. I just cut down the meat and I kind of core them out and get rid of them, get the meat out from around the hide. Chris, it has black rust on it. May wove steel. Okay, do this. Depending on what kind of handle it's got on it. Get some boiling water. Put just the blade. Bring it to a good boil, and then just put the blade into it. Okay, that will convert it. The rust will convert from red oxide, orangey stuff, to black oxide, which is dead. That's okay. Just put it in there. If it's got a wood handle or something, don't submerge that. Just put the working blade part into that water and let it just cool down. Okay. Then you want to oil it up. Cooking oil works fine for this because you got to make sure it's an oil that's not going to be toxic later on. So just use cooking oil. Slather that puppy down real good. Let it sit overnight. Wipe all the excess off of it. And then use something. I've used a clean sock, turned inside out, so it's that the part that go against your skin that side, and sit there and strop on it, and all that black should come off where it's down to usable metal again. And that's what we did with butcher knives and stuff like that in the kitchen that didn't get used and they rusted a little bit. Put them in boiling water a minute to kill the rust. Then it was wipe it off and oil it up real good and let it sit 24 hours in the oil. And then Granny had put it up against the edge of a 2x4 or some wood board or something and just start kind of bearing down and doing, and that rust would just disappear and it'd be usable blade again. Yeah, Farrell, a box cutter, like, because all I need to do is make the initial cut. Do that cut down the middle and be able to peel up so I can start skinning from the inside and pull that big old hide off. And it normally just dulls the snot out of a knife going through that thick hide, especially boar, which are a little thicker than a domestic pig. And since they lay in the dirt all the time, it gets pushed into all the nooks and crannies of their wrinkly up hide, and then it grows over it. And so literally inside the meat, inside the actual hide, you'll have sand, or red clay dust or whatever down here in my neck of the woods. And just you go to cutting it, instead of it cleanly slicing, it sounds like you're cutting sandpaper. It's like it goes up through it, and you look at the blade and you see scratch marks all over the side of the blade where it's stuff in it. So I just use a box cutter, sacrificable. Get in there good, get it down there so I can lift up and start taking my knife, come underneath that edge and start peeling and getting. I just go around and take the meat out. Especially the hogs and things that have been eating a lot of acorns. You don't want a lot of that fat anyway. If the fat is yellowish, it probably ain't going to taste good. If the fat is white and creamy, it will taste good. But if it's kind of yellowish, it looks kind of like ivory a little bit, there's tannins in it where he's been eating a ton of acorns off of black oaks and stuff like that. And he's going to be a little bit bitter. So I don't really want all that fat then, And it's just a old down and dirty trick. Have you, John asked, Blake, have you ever tried wearing solid black for disappearing into cover versus camouflage? Black stands out better than anything, actually. The old Army fatigues of the 1980s, they figured out the black patch is what you can see at the farthest way out. So all black sounds great and tactical. And in urban settings, black on black works real good. In nature, you're darker than your environment, and you kind of stand out even at night. So it's like a darker dark right there. I prefer camouflage or a lighter green color. Look at deer, they're gray. He's gray, and yet he just blends into a solid green forest. It's just like he's gone. He's white bellied, got big old goofy ears that are tan or light colored underneath, and he's grayish, and yet he can just go and he's gone. To me, camouflage of a neutral earthy tone works better. And even in urban environments and things, I found that worn camouflage that is a little more gray and a little more light blends in better, less attraction. Bushcraft with the Preacher. Yes, I have read Kephart and Nesmunk and all of them, and I think they do apply to a lot. Now, they are people of their time, okay? And like Nesmunk, you got to realize, what was Nesmunk doing? He was going around in the recreation area, so to speak, a lot of times, because you see him talking about stopping at this inn or whatever. And that was relatively a new phenomenon of that day. And so he's traveling around. Now, today, they couldn't be like going to state parks and things like that, big wilderness things that did have supplies and stuff. And so Nesmunk's gear could reflect that. He carried very little gear, actually. And but he was never more than far away from resources. And several times in the book, he talked about he would be behind the inn, camping in like the backyard of the inn and stuff like that. And so he could carry a lot lighter. He could go ultra light. But his focus is what I think is the biggest thing we need to take out of how he focused on what is your actual need and what is your actual requirement. And don't go way over it. No overkill. And that he found more enjoyment with the minimalist, relying more on his craft and ability and skill than he did on carrying the gear. I mean, his tent was really just shirt material that had been treated, and he would nail up real quick posts to form the shanty and just use tacks and put it together, and then pull the tacks out, resave them, and fold it up, and leave the wooden frame. So, and then of course, Kephart was really a man of the Appalachians, really a man of mountain villages and way of life and the beauty of it. And again, I believe they do apply a lot to today. And there's several others out there. There's several books. Look at the early, like 1910 Boy Scout book, or better yet, get a copy of the Boy Scout handbook manual from World War II. It is shocking how in-depth that book goes into, and the skills and things they talk about in those days. Our military doesn't train as well as the Boy Scouts were being trained in World War II. So it's something to go look at. Awesome, Mike Bolton. Glad to hear that. Bet it's pretty. Slingshot Warrior, recurve or compound? Yeah, I prefer recurve, to be honest. Compounds are nice, but they get to be a lot of bells and whistles to me. I got a good friend that he's very good with a compound, but he's got all kinds of sights. He's got all kinds of stuff. And I'm just old hickory bow type guy. I shoot by instinct. And so, well, Jackie Burns, thank you very much. Well, guys, it looks to be about 2 hours, about time to call it quits. I do appreciate everything. Mike Simmons, you saw it, our gun had the DD camo tarp, stood out more than the one when plain brown. Yeah. Plain Jane, dull, earthy tones blend in, because then I can put something lighter and brighter in front of it and really break it up. I mean, remember recently in the stealth, I showed how I'm taking that piece of bank line I made up for that jungle knot and just quickly put together a blind. How I could just sit down and I was gone, and I'm just 15 feet from the camera, where I made a depth of it. And so a plain brown, if I'm trying to be camouflage, give me a plain dull earthy tone. Camouflage for its, like, even this does really, really good, but I'd put something in front of it, because the pattern itself we kind of get in our head. And if I'm looking for, camouflage, I'll spot camouflage patterns, and it stands out more than you would think it should. We're just this, and on the other side of this is that brown, that Cody-like brown. I could take that Cody brown and put a little bit of depth of stuff in front of it. Man, it'd be invisible at 50 feet. Whereas this, you probably see it 100 feet off if it's not the right background to break it up. So, well, guys, I greatly appreciate everything. And I'll be doing another one next week. Please, if you think of something, you got a question, please hit me up. I'll be doing a video tomorrow about the scammer and etc., trying to tell everybody. Again, if I'm going to be doing any kind of discussion with y'all or asking y'all or whatever, I will be doing it on camera. It's me. It will never be a post like that, And should I have a heart attack, there is a video in the archive for my wife to release to let everybody know I passed away. So don't worry. There's something set up. So again, guys, thank you very much. Thank you all for your comments and being here. Really do appreciate it. Hope y'all have a great, wonderful night, and hope to see you next time. Till then, guys, hope you have some safe journeys. Talk to you later.